All right, burgeoning viewers, one quick note for you. A subscriber a day in October. If we hit 31 subscribers in 31 days, one lucky subscriber will walk away with the entire Modern Horizons art card series. Additionally, a comment a day. Any subscriber that leaves a comment in every video posted by MTG Burgeoning during the month of October will become eligible for the November Pack Wars. On November 1st, a list of all subscribers that left a comment on every MTG Burgeoning video during the month of October will be compiled, and from this list, one subscriber will be randomly chosen to participate in the November Pack Wars. So hope for peace, but prepare for war. Burgeonites, you have returned to Build a Deck Tuesday, where we continue to build with our buddy of two reflections, Riku. Burgeoning fans, welcome back. Here we are on another Tuesday as we continue our series in building around Riku of Two Reflections. For anyone who may be new to this current deck build, you can click on any of the links below for a quick refresher as to where we are in our process of building Riku of Two Reflections. Now we're 3 videos into this series so far, so as a quick review, very quick, these are the 24 cards that we've already included in this Riku of Two Reflections build. Earthcraft, Tooth and Nail, Rite of Replication, Doubling Season, Warp World, Genesis Wave, Sneak Attack, Intuition, Snapcaster Mage, Skull Clamp, Druid's Repository, Exploration, Avenger of Zendikar, Phylath World Sculptor, Chancellor of the Forge, Deranged Hermit, Deep Forest Hermit, Siege Gang Commander, Hornet Queen, Mere Battlesphere, Dragon Lair Spider, Dragon Broodmother, Omnoth Locust of Rage, and the Rampaging Baloths. So these were the first 24 cards added to our Riku of Two Reflections deck. And to review the next 12 cards we wanted to include were cards that allowed us to get some additional permanents onto the battlefield when they enter into the battlefield. Lands, or maybe they draw some cards, something to give us some kind of advantages when they come into play, particularly making spells like Warp World and Genesis Wave even more valuable. So here are those 12 spells. Now, considering that the majority of the cards added to this deck already have some pretty high converted mana costs, we wanted to make sure that the converted mana costs for these next 12 cards were as low as possible, 3 or less, as a way in which to bring down our overall curve of per card cost. So here we go. Card 1 of this 12 subset, Wood Elves. 2 and a green. When it comes into play, we search our library for a forest card and put it into play. Then we shuffle our library. Notice that the text says forest card and not basic forest. So we could fetch out a shock. We could fetch out a triome. It does not have to be a basic forest. So Wood Elves is a great inclusion. And imagine with Riku, adding a green and a blue to his casting cost will net us 2 forest cards. Next up, number 2, Farhaven Elf. Same mana cost as Wood Elves, same power toughness. However, when he comes into play, we search our library for a basic land and put it into the battlefield tapped. So Wood Elves gets us any forest card into play untapped. Farhaven Elf limits us to basic lands and comes into play tapped. Still, we get to put a land into play, and that's a beneficial creature to add, particularly if we're thinking about Genesis Waves, if we're thinking about Warp Worlds, and if we're thinking about something that Riku could copy early. That's all right. Number 3, Spring Bloom Druid. How good is Modern Horizons and just the number of high-quality cards in that set? That's one of the best sets ever. And this is a common. 2 and a green, 1/1 body. When Spring Bloom Druid enters the battlefield, we may sacrifice a land. And if we do, we search our library for 2 basic lands and put them onto the battlefield tapped. So here we get to double the number of lands that go onto the battlefield. Granted, we have to sacrifice 1. However, we do have some creatures that have landfall in this deck, and that would be a great way to increase the number of permanents on our side, particularly if we copy it with Riku of Two Reflections. Next up we have number 4, Elvish Rejuvenator. 2 and a green, another 1/1 elf druid. That seems to be the theme so far. When Elvish Rejuvenator enters the battlefield, we look at the top 5 cards of our library. We may put a land from among them onto the battlefield tapped, and then put the rest on the bottom of our library in a random order. So we don't really get to search our library like the previous 3 elves that we included in this deck. However, it's a numbers game. If we end up including the customary 35 to 38 lands in this deck, then that means that, every 10 cards we draw should see about 4 lands. So that's 2 in every 5 cards. So on average, when we reveal the 5 cards from Elvish Rejuvenator, the numbers indicate that we should see about 2 lands. Well, we only need 1, and it puts that land right into play tapped. So that can be any land that we include in our deck. So Elvish Rejuvenator checks those boxes. All right, next up, we're leaving the elves momentarily to talk about Risen Reef. For 1 green and a blue, we got a 1/1 elemental that says, whenever Risen Reef or another elemental enters the battlefield under our control, we look at the top card of our library. If it's a land card, we may put it onto the battlefield tapped. If we don't put the card onto the battlefield, put it into our hand. All right, so let's examine this here for a moment. No, this is not a straight elemental deck. Risen Reef triggers himself, and Risen Reef triggers whenever an elemental enters the battlefield under our control. So if we reflect back for a moment to the 24 cards already added to this deck, Avenger of Zendikar is an elemental, Phylath, World Sculptor is an elemental, Omnath, Locus of Rage is an elemental, and creates elemental creature tokens whenever a land comes into play. So Risen Reef is a great card that offers some good synergy with some of the other creatures in this deck. Plus, this is a fabulous target for a kicked Rite of Replication. How would you like to work off of 30 Risen Reef triggers? That's a combination of 30 cards drawn and or lands on the battlefield. Wow, that's pretty nice. That's flavor country right there, folks. All right, number 6, back to our elves. We have a Coiling Oracle, green and a blue. When it enters the battlefield, we reveal the top card of our library. If it's a land, it goes onto the battlefield. Otherwise, we put it into our hand. So we either draw a card or play a land. Coiling Oracle, great card. Next up, staying with our elves, number 7, we have Llanowar Visionary. From Core 2021, when it enters the battlefield, draw a card, and we can tap for a green. It's a 2/2 for 2 and a green. That's not bad at all. I mean, if we were to copy this with Riku, we put 2 of these into play, we draw 2 cards, and if they survive till our next turn, we've ramped up with 2 green, and we have 2 2/2 bodies on the battlefield for a total CMC of 5. Llanowar Visionary does some work, and it warrants its inclusion in the deck. All right, we're down to our last 5 cards. Next up, number 8. Fibblethip the Lost. 1 in a blue, this legendary homunculus is a 1/1, and when it enters the battlefield, we draw a card. However, if it enters from our library or was cast from our library, draw 2 cards instead. So if Fibblethip enters the battlefield from our library, maybe from a Warp World, maybe from a Genesis Wave, maybe even from some spells that we'll see sometime in the future. We're going to draw 2 cards instead of 1. That's fantastic. And even though it is a legendary creature, if we were to copy him with a Riku activation of a Simic, the token comes into play. We choose one of these 2 creatures to die immediately because of the legend rule. Of course, we choose the token. The token dies, and we still get to draw the cards because of the ETB trigger. So Fibblethip the Lost has found its way into our deck. All right, so we're getting down to the bottom 4 here. Number 9, back to Modern Horizons, Icefang Coatl. Green and a blue, a 1/1 flash, flying snake, and when it enters the battlefield, we draw a card. If we have 3 or more other snow permanents, Icefang Coatl has Death Touch. Now, at this moment, I don't know if we're going to have any additional snow permanents added to the deck. That's something that we'll discuss as we get closer to the mana base installation. But for right now, a green and a blue for a 1/1 flash flyer that replaces itself when it ETBs. For only a green and a blue, he has to be included. And plus, if we were to pair that with a Riku activation, that's just everything coming up Millhouse right there. All right, card number 9. Not as exciting as the Icefang Coatl, but not every card can be, right, folks? 1 in a green, an 0/4 plant wall. When Wall of Blossoms enters the battlefield, draw a card. That's it. 1 in a green, replaces itself when it ETBs, but please notice that it's also a plant. So Avenger of Zendikar and its landfall ability of putting a +1/+1 counter on each plant we control, those counters will go on Wall of Blossoms too. And just another thing, with Riku adding a Simic to the 1 in the green, we're netting 2 0/4 blockers, and we're drawing 2 cards. All right, so those are the first 10. Now, I will preface these next 2 cards with completely understanding and agreeing that, yes, we kind of skirted the criteria a little bit with this subset of cards in this video. We were trying to prioritize creatures. However, prioritizing creatures does not mean excluding spells. It's just we want to make sure that the majority of the 12 cards that we include are creatures. And I think 10 out of 12, well, I think we hit each nail on the head and drove it right through the baseboard. So, with that being said, number 11, not a creature, it's Growth Spiral. Green and a blue instant, we draw a card, and we may put a land card from our hand onto the battlefield. So this hopefully will get us a land into play, and it replaces itself. So in some ways, I don't want to say it's a free spell, because it technically isn't, but for green and a blue, we invest that into playing enough. Let me try this again, because I do speak English. So for green and a blue, we cast this spell, and we get to draw a card, so it replaces itself, and we just put any land from our hand right into play. And it's an instant, so we can do that on our opponent's turn. And if we add an Izzet to this spell, a blue and a red from Riku, then for a red, a green, and 2 blue, we're drawing 2 cards and hopefully putting 2 lands onto the battlefield. So this is a great spell, and I think it's worthy of its inclusion in this Riku deck. Not a creature, but still, we did prioritize our creatures. All right, and number 12, our last card to add to our Riku of Two Reflections deck for this video, and it's on the same lines of Growth Spiral, but this spell is a lot more free than Growth Spiral, and that's Manamorphose. For 1 and a Gruul hybrid, which is a red and a green, we add 2 mana and any combination of colors to our mana pool, and then we draw a card. That's it. So we can cast 1 in a red, and we just get that mana right back and get a free card. 1 in a green, get that mana right back, and draw a card. I should take a moment to note, however, that the mana that's generated by Manamorphose cannot be used by Riku to target Manamorphose. We have to have the mana available to copy the spell when we cast it, and we do not get the mana from Manamorphose until after the spell resolves. But still, if we were to use Riku over there to copy Manamorphose, imagine the mana possibilities and just drawing 2 cards and then getting back 4 mana. Ridiculous. Just ridiculous. Manamorphose is number 12. And that's it, folks. Those are the next 12 cards added to our Riku of Two Reflections EDH Commander deck. Now, what's the next 12? What other cards can we add to round out this deck? We've already got 36 in the 99, so we don't have too many more cards to add before we put in our mana base. So what's it going to be? Some additional win conditions, maybe some graveyard recursion, maybe some card draw, maybe some destruction, maybe some tutoring. Let me know in the comments below or over on our tappedout.net page for Riku of Two Reflections. This is MTG Burgeoning, folks. You go forth and you enjoy your day. Want to become a Pack Wars combatant? 4 easy steps. Step number 1. Click on the link below in the description or go to www.buymeacoffee.com/MTG Burgeoning. Step number 2, select either membership or support. Membership will enroll you into Pack Wars for $5 each month. Support will cost $5 for 1 month. Step number 3, complete payment information. The name you use will appear on the site. Use your real name, use your YouTube handle, or use no name at all and be anonymous. Be sure to include your email address in the information. Step number 4, most importantly, prepare for war.